Kelly. Commissioner Halp is on the phone. He's a 704 number. He just messaged me.
On this January 12, 2022, I call the meeting to order the Centralina Regional Council Executive Board. Welcome, everyone. As always, I must say this every time for us to stay legal. To help us move through the agenda efficiently, please remain muted except when making a motion, a second, voting, or posing a question or comment. Be sure to state your name for the record when making a motion, a second, or when speaking. We've been monitoring attendance as board members have joined Zoom. In the interest of time, we will not call the names of board members participating via computer since your names were recorded when you logged into the meeting and are displayed in the participant list. Kelly will call the names of board members whose names are not shown on the participant list. Names will be called in alphabetical order by last name. I will now ask our clerk to call the roll. Ms. Weston.
Karen Alexander. Peter Asciuto. Corinthia Lewis Lemon. Elaine Powell. And again, if you did not hear your name called, it's because we were able to see you listed on the participant list. And Mr. Chairman, we do have quorum.
Thank you, Kelly. We do have a quorum. I'll now ask for a moment of silence, but before we do, just let's think of Lynn Shue, our partner in the Cabarrus County, Commissioner Lynn Shue, who planned to be with us, but for unforeseen circumstance cannot. I'll now call for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. According to the amendments to the agenda, I do have one to add. It will be added to the consent agenda. It was sent by email yesterday. Some of you may have seen it. Staff has requested that we add this. It's an approval of an additional FY22 North Carolina Division of Aging and Adult Services funding allocations in the amount of $763,090 for the Home and Community Care Block Grant Program. The Area Agency on Aging received an earlier allocation, so this additional funding for the program was included in the state's budget, signed into law on November the 18th. May I have a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second, Mr. Jarvis.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Kelly? I'll ask the clerk to call the roll. As many in favor of the motion will say yes. Those opposed will answer no.
Peter Asciuto.
Yes.
Bobby Compton.
Yes.
Larkin Eggleston.
Yes.
Jean Halp. Jay McCosh.
Yes.
Pedro Mori.
Yes.
William Morgan.
Yes.
Christine Poinsett. Amelia Stenson Wesley.
Yes.
David Williams.
Yes.
Jarvis Woodburn.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that motion did pass.
Thank you. The motion passes. And we'll move on for the consent agenda itself. In addition, the item we just added to the consent agenda also includes the approval of the 2022 Federal Action Plan that Leslie Mazingo from Strategics Consulting presented to us in our November meeting. There's also a resolution to adopt the state's updated records and retention schedule. There's an amendment to the current year's budget. And lastly, we have the minutes from the November meeting. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have a motion and a second. I'll now ask the clerk to call the roll. As many in favor will answer yes. Those opposed will answer no. Kelly?
Peter Ashudo, Bobby Compton,
Yes.
Larkin Eggleston,
Yes.
Gene Halp, Jay McCosh,
Yes.
Pedro Mori,
Yes.
William Morgan,
Yes.
Christine Poinsett, Amelia Stinson Wesley,
Yes.
Elaine Powell,
Yes.
David Williams,
Yes.
Jarvis Woodburn.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that motion did pass.
The motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We now move to item 5, Federal Relations Update. Leslie Mazingo, Strategic Consultant, will present an update on Centralina's federal relations activities, including performance report from November through December of 2021. Ms. Mazingo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all virtually. First and foremost, as always, you have a performance report. It's on page 31. Rather than going through it item by item, hopefully you've had a chance to look it over. Happy to answer questions that you might have about it. And as I give a couple of quick updates, if you have questions, at the end of my update about it, if you haven't had a chance to look it over, but it is on page 31 and it covers November and December, as the chairman noted. One of the things that, as I was reviewing it for tonight's presentation, that caught my eye was the work that we had been doing on the American Rescue Plan, the flexibility bill, which the Senate had passed and the House HR 5735 was still working on. We had been advocating. We were successful in getting a lot of attention from our region's members, some of them in particular, Congressman Budd, Congressman Hudson, signing on to that legislation. And it was really moving forward in a bipartisan fashion. As you probably all know, and you've received information from our executive director regarding the final rule did finally come out. So that was exciting news and all over everybody's email. But the things about those 400 and something pages that I want to call to your attention, the biggest part of it is that they did include a $10 million opportunity for just a standard revenue loss expenditure. So previously in the interim rule, you had to do a very complicated calculation to determine if you have revenue loss. Now you get a standard deduction, if you will, very IRS is, but you get the opportunity for that 10 million just to go as your standard deduction for revenue loss without having to do that complicated formula that they had set up. So rather than do that formula, you can take the 10 million that goes into your general fund expenditures. You spend that just as you would any of the other revenue loss categories before. And it also, which I think is really cool, so it creates an enormous flexibility, but it also allows you to use those funds, even though they're federal dollars, because they fall into that general revenue category for revenue loss. You can use those as match up against as a match requirement, your non-federal match for federal grants. You can use that local recovery fund money for that purpose up to that $10 million in that category. So that's a really important change that will give everybody a great deal of flexibility, plus a little bit of extra match money for other grants. There's a number of other things that the final rule does. Again, most of it all geared towards greater flexibility, which is really good news for those that have been struggling with how to spend their dollars. I'm not going to have time tonight. We could do 2 hours probably on the final rule. I know the chairman doesn't want me to take that long, so I'm not going to cover all those issues, but just know that Centralina is here for you. We are here to answer your questions and help everybody on your teams and your communities know that the School of Government holds office hours regularly. Tomorrow morning at 8:30 is one of those times, and they do it phenomenal job of going through the final rule. But I did want to just highlight for you that flexibility and the importance of that, being able to use it for the general category and as a non-federal match for your federal grants. Want to mention very quickly appropriations. We're still working under that continuing resolution through mid-February, February 18th. And that's $1.3 trillion in regular spending. They're really caught up on how much goes to domestic programs, how much goes to defense programs. They need to get that through because that does actually kind of kick off a lot of what was passed in the infrastructure bill, which is Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I want to remind you that is also called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So whenever you see that online, BIL, and websites related to that, it is the same thing as IIJA. So the administration really wants us to call it the BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And there are, as I've reported before, over $100 billion in new grants over 5 years in that is not just about transportation, but it's about energy and sustainability and resiliency and broadband. So all kinds of additional money, which is why it's an infrastructure bill, not just a transportation bill. So pay really close to that, close attention for that to be coming out mid to late February. We expect those grants to start getting announced. So I know you've always paid attention to the grant news and alerts that that Centralina sends out to you. You get them twice a month that they go out. They're on the membership portal where you can go and see what grants are announced. And like I said, they come out twice a month, but mid to late February, we're expecting a lot of these new grants to start coming out. So I want to encourage everyone to be paying close attention to those documents so that you know when there's opportunities to apply for all those new funds. I'll stop there and answer questions about this or the performance report or anything else about the federal actions that are taking place that y'all may have.
Thank you, Leslie. Any questions for Leslie Mazingo with Strategic Consulting?
This is Christine Poinsett. I'm here. I've been knocked off a couple times, but right now I'm here.
Okay, thank you. While we have Leslie on the line, any questions regarding her report? I will say, Leslie, you said a while ago, according to the agenda, you get 10 minutes. But I'll never call you down because you have so much information. And you said earlier that you could speak 2 hours on this, and you're right. I mean, you come out and when you start talking, you got so much information to provide to us. And I did see, I want to share this with the executive board. I did see in the paper where you got Congressman McHenry to talk with the Statesville and Ardell County folks, and our own William Morgan was in on that group. And so I want everyone to know what you can do for each of our folks here within our region is to get the senators or the congressmen to meet in their place, here wherever, and you can fix that and make that happen. So I just want everybody to know that. I did say that. So that's a good thing for Statesville and Ardell County to have McHenry face to face. So I appreciate you doing that for those folks.
And keep in mind along those lines, Mr. Chairman, if I may put in a plug for our regular advocacy, we do take advantage when they're in their district offices, particularly in the month of August when they have a lot more time. But we do have part of Centralina, what we call August advocacy. It's become sometimes a fall advocacy. It bleeds over into September. But we set up meetings with the members of Congress for this exact reason. And we talk regional issues, but we also do that to give the individual members an opportunity to talk about issues that are going on in their own community. And the members have been great about working with us. Our newest member to our congressional delegation from this region, Virginia Fox, met with us this past fall. And I think we had maybe 8 people, something like that came to the meeting. And we always have a great turnout with Congressman Budd. As you know, you've led that meeting for us many times. So yeah, we also have an opportunity to do that as a group where you can also bring up your individual issues. So be on the lookout this summer for some announcements of when those next meetings will occur. That's
great. Thank you. And to put in Councilman Morgan's words, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I believe that quote was in the paper. regarding your meeting that you had lined up. So that's true. That's very true. So yeah, that's great. Any further comments or questions for Leslie before we move on? If not, I'll need a motion to accept the strategic consulting performance report for November through December 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Second, help. Second, help.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I will now ask our clerk to call the roll. As many in favor will answer yes. Those opposed will say no. Ms. Weston?
Peter Ashuto. Bobby Compton,
Yes.
Larkin Eggleston,
Yes.
Jean Haupt,
Yes. Yes.
Jay McCosh,
Yes.
Pedro Mori, William Morgan,
Yes.
Christine Poinsett,
Yes.
Elaine Powell,
Yes.
Amelia Stinson Wesley,
Yes.
David Williams,
Yes.
Jarvis Woodburn.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that motion did pass.
The motion passes for Leslie Masivo's report. Very much appreciated. Thank you again, Leslie. We'll move down to item 6, the FY23 budget preview. The executive board will review the placeholder annual operating pass-through budget proposals for fiscal year 2023 prior to the Board of Delegates meeting next month in February. So I'd like Denise Strasser to present that, our finance director.
Hello, everybody. So tonight I'm here to present to you the fiscal year 23 operating and pass-through budget. But to start with, I'll give you a brief overview of the procedures for adopting the new placeholder budget. To comply with Centralina's charters to have the placeholder budget approved by April 15th, the placeholder budget must be approved by the Board of Delegates in their February meeting. So at this meeting tonight, we are presenting the placeholder budget to the Executive Board for their recommendation to propose this placeholder budget to the Board of Delegates in February. Along with that, we are also recommending that the membership dues assessment remains at 24 cents per capita, but to remove the minimum requirements of $750 for each member. We feel that allowing the membership dues to calculate at some of the smaller communities' actual population will be more responsive to their needs and relieve some financial burden if they would like to become a member. We feel this will be opening opportunities for them to benefit from our services and from our regional collaboration. Anybody have any questions on that?
Any questions from Ms. Strasser? You know, again, we're talking about leaving the per capita the same, but removing the $750.
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
this is William. I applaud staff for taking that step. I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense. That's a little more user-friendly, if you will, and we've talked about that in the past. But I would say, as far as the budget overall, you know, one cannot live by dues alone. And I don't know if Michelle's listening or she's there, but you know, ramp it up. You know, grants they're out there, and Leslie will tell you that the pipeline is full. So now's the opportunity, and now's the time to get a little more aggressive as far as exploring every single grant opportunity that we have in front of us. So Denise, thank you. Jolene, thank you. And you know, the staff, great job. I appreciate that.
Thank you,
Second, help.
Councilman Morgan. Yes. Yes, sir. Any further comments? I think removing the 750, we've had, since I've been involved with Centralina on the executive board, especially as chair, we've lost some of the very small communities, the smaller towns within our 9-county region. And I didn't think about this, but it came to my attention that the $750 was more than the 24 cent per capita. So it just didn't make sense. So I think I think the finance crew led by Denise Strasser is on the right path to try to get these smaller towns back with us, because Centralina can provide so much to the smaller communities. So getting them back on board with us and letting us show what we can do for them to help them, whether it's grow or economic development and whatever case it may be. So I think that's a good move. I agree with Councilman Morgan on the work done through the finance department. So any further comments or questions for Denise Strasser? Denise, does that conclude your presentation? Do you have anything else?
Yes, it does. Just one quick fact for you though.
Okay.
In order to hit the $750 dues calculation, your population needs to be over 3,000. So for some of the smaller communities, it does make a huge difference for them.
Yes. Oh, good. I'm glad you put the numbers out there. That's huge. So again, a good move on your part and Centralina's part to make that change. Any further comments, questions? Great. Okay. The action is to recommend the proposed FY 2023 operating and pass-through placeholder budget ordinances in the amount of $7,508,647 and $15,460,000 respectively. Membership dues assessment, 24 cents per capita, and the removal of the minimum assessment of $750 per member to be approved and for adoption by the Board of Delegates. Need a motion, please.
So moved.
So move, Haupt.
Set.
Okay, we have a motion, Commissioner Haupt, who's the second?
Second.
We have a second. I'll now ask the clerk to call the roll. As many in favor will answer yes. Those opposed will answer no. Ms. Weston, please call the roll.
Peter Ashudo,
Yes.
Bobby Compton,
Yes.
Larkin Eggleston,
Yes.
Gene Haupt,
Yes.
Jay McCosh,
Yes.
Pedro Mori,
Yes.
William Morgan,
Yes.
Christine Poinsett,
Yes.
Elaine Powell,
Yes.
Amelia Stinson Wesley,
Yes.
David Williams,
Yes.
Jarvis Woodburn.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that motion did pass.
Thank you. The motion passes. And everyone, I think that does conclude as far as motions and roll call that Kelly Weston will have to do. We'll move on now. Everything else will be received as information. We'll move to item 7, the Regional Resilience Collaborative Project presentation. This should be very interesting, by Christina Danis. Christina, welcome.
Chair, thank you everyone from Centralina Board. It's my pleasure tonight to present the Regional Resilience Collaborative Project and present the project recommendations. This project launched in April of 2021 and is nearing its grant completion. So this is a timely presentation to tell you about what we've learned and where we're headed. Next slide. The Regional Resilience Collaborative team includes myself and Connor Choka, the Community Economic Development Resilience Analyst from Centralina, and Lee Zelowicz, the consultant from IEM, who's the Senior Emergency Management Planner and our subject matter expert. And you'll be hearing from Lee tonight on this call because we're going to share this presentation. However, the most important part of the team are the 9 county emergency management leads and their support team members, who during a coronavirus pandemic dedicated time and resources to work on this project and asked us to please consider it as concluding as a program at Centralina because they found great value to working together and being collaborative on recovery, and the pandemic and their experiences certainly brought them to that conversation. So you'll learn more about that tonight, going from project to program. Next slide. The project funding came from a USEDA disaster relief grant, and the Centralina Economic Development District oversaw the procurement process and selected IEM as the contractor on this project. The EDD partnered with the council and our 9 county emergency management directors to launch the collaborative in April of 2021. Next slide. The regional resilience objectives are really about building the recovery bridge between emergency management functions and local government operations, which are critical for recovery and resilience. And that's a theme that is really, we're going to lift up that bridge building between emergency management and local government functions. And this is to bolster the capacity of community economic resilience and create, as a part of the project, our objective was to create tangible and relevant recovery documents for each of our EMs and the 9 counties. Next slide. This slide is, if you can click on it, Kelly, it's a GIF. There it goes. Thank you. So this slide presents the 9-county Centralina region, the 5 emergency management areas, and the 5 hazard mitigation plans, the 2 nuclear planning zones, the 2 domestic preparedness plans that will come through, and the 8 COGs that reflect the counties that are informed by hazard mitigation and recovery planning. And 9 counties of Centralina were able to gather this information and serve as a regional resource for sharing and working together. And all of these jurisdictions overlap. And so the role of Centralina as a council of governments to assist with recovery planning was found to be very valuable and important as we move forward. Next slide. So the project was built on 3 phases. And in the first phase, it focused on understanding the needs of the regions, jurisdictions, and the realm of emergency management. The team met with each of the 9 county emergency management leads to identify the needs. And these activities in phase 1, in this early phase, caused the project to actually pivot to a recovery lens in phase 2. The 9 county EM said, we're doing a lot of planning already on hazard mitigation plans, nuclear plans, domestic plans. We know each other in the response world. What we need help with is working together in the recovery world. And that's what happens after the response ends. And Lee will tell you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But as we pivoted to recovery, we then engaged them with that recovery lens. And we looked at regional resilience as a collaborative and created workshops, 1 and 2, that actually engaged the EM leads and local county government officials. These workshops included representatives from FEMA. They include representatives from the North Carolina Office of Response and Recovery and other partners throughout the state in North Carolina Department of Public Safety and Emergency Management. The project showed as a showcase based upon the summit that was launched in September before these workshops, where we were able to get NCORE, the North Carolina Office of Response and Recovery, and FEMA to partner along with our sponsor, EDA, Hillary Sherman, to recognize this project as a really important component and a lens for moving from response to recovery. The project resulted in 10 deliverables, and they include template documents for each of the 9 counties, a local leader disaster recovery guide, which Lee will tell you a little bit more about, which is shared on FEMA's website, and a GIS equity and resilience tool. So at this point in time, I'd like to transfer to Lee Zelowitz from IEM.
Thank you, Christina. If we could go to the next slide. So again, as Christina noted, the project in that initial needs assessment identified recovery as a gap and recovery planning for the region. And so the project directly pivoted to focus on filling that gap. This also aligns very well with the focus on long-term recovery and resilience related to the CARES Act and ARPA. So to kind of set the stage for understanding what we mean by recovery, we want to also mention what response is. So response is commonly what we think of in terms of, fire professionals, first responders, law enforcement, ENS out there when an incident happens. That's in the hours, days, weeks, right after an incident. Short-term recovery is then when an incident has had larger impacts that result in efforts in the weeks and months. This could be different things such as clearing roads, repairing essential utilities, and supporting the reopening of businesses. And then you have the long-term recovery and a focus on resilience, right? This is when we move into the months and years, and this isn't a very long experience, and it really does come from major disasters that cause catastrophic damage. May include things like rebuilding homes, schools, other facilities, definitely rebuilding the economy, and addressing existing needs in the community. And at this point, with recovery going from short-term to long-term, you have all kinds of partners engaged in this, but local government really takes on a lead role in decision-making and how to focus the use of funds from state and federal partners. So the next slide. And as Christina already noted, one of the things the project highlighted in that needs assessment and that we focused on over time was building an understanding that emergency management professionals can own the plan for pre-disaster recovery. But when it comes to actual recovery, that's where you're going to have your city county management take hold of the reins and help drive that in the decision-making process. So it's really understanding those roles for the region. Next slide, please. And then additionally noting that the collaborative in the sense, basically combine and then influence and impact economic resilience. So, it's great that Centralina already has these target industry clusters, and they really can be and should be considered in terms of pre-disaster planning for the region. And, pre-disaster planning then allows you to maximize the use of funds, save time, and support personnel, and engage the community. And Christina is going to focus more on the SEDS in a moment as well. Next slide, please. So once the pivot happened and we moved into phase 2, we started with a regional recovery summit, which engaged over 60 individuals, many of them from the 9 counties across multiple disciplines, but also, as Christina mentioned, FEMA, USEDA, the North Carolina Emergency Management, and North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resilience. I would note as well, we had individuals attending from other regions throughout the United States as well. So it was very well received and engaged folks. Also wanted to just note, I appreciated the participation of board members. I know specifically Elaine Powell was in attendance and appreciated the input. The summit featured discussions with representatives from state and local government, nonprofit organizations, and leaders from even citizen-led efforts that had experience with recovery, and focused on 4 main themes, which you can see on the slide: whole community collaboration, economic and small business recovery, disaster housing and land use development, and infrastructure recovery. And the discussions resulted in some major themes that emerged, including the importance of planning and building relationships in advance, equity being a key factor linked directly to recovery, and that recovery must engage community partners, the public, and businesses, in addition to local government, state partners, and federal partners. Next slide, please. So from here, in phase 2, we entered into the development and provision of some of the tools that were provided to the 9 counties. And the attendees, we had 13 because this was a planning focused workshop. So it was, again, emergency management leaders and planning team. We had 8 of the 9 counties in attendance, and we followed up with the 9th county individually to provide the resources and cover the main concepts, which included key recovery concepts and then these planning tools and recommended actions for implementation. So the rollout of the template had a companion guide that also will help provide the region an opportunity to bolster regional coordination for recovery planning. And the template itself is customizable and allows that ability to address regional resilience and support communities with a focus on business economic recovery from future disaster events and economic shocks. Next slide, please. The final workshop held in November centered around how local leaders can ensure that disaster recovery is used as an opportunity to advance equity and build economic resilience. You can see that, again, this was a larger experience in terms of number of attendees and had a larger grip. But again, a large focus on this was presenting some of the tools and resources that will help the region, specifically the Local Leader Disaster Recovery Guide, which is a resource developed under this project for recovery planning considerations for county managers and elected officials. And again, this is the item that FEMA is even sharing on the website. And then we also introduced the Recovery and Equity GIS web app. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. So again, the web app itself is designed to help local governments build pre-disaster plans, have planning assumptions for them, and to drive post-disaster decision-making that supports equity and resilience. And then some of the key data points that are in this to try to help that are identifying critical facilities in the region, things from dams, bridges, police stations, fire stations, transit lines, obviously the bus and light rail, and then state and federal highways being there and available, and the freight rail lines. The agriculture being an important industry in the region, food infrastructure, and then information regarding food deserts based on proximity to grocery stores. There are also hazard information involved to help them in terms of floodplains and some fixed facilities, specifically the nuclear facilities that could impact the region. And then very importantly being the layers that focus on social vulnerability and community resilience. So the mapping tool allows them to look at all of these data points at once or separately, to add them, subtract them, to have an understanding of where they have social vulnerability or areas of low community resilience in relationship to the other levels. And thank you for the opportunity to present today, and I'll turn it back over to Christina.
Thank you, Lee. And Lee and his partner, Megan Aminto, who has moved on to other things at this time, were great partners from IEM, and our county emergency management leads and the Centralina team really appreciate all that they have done. And in a short period of time, if you look at this project launching in April and finishing up in December to get all these work products. One of the additional products that we did was the creation of a Centralina webpage that for the Regional Resilience Collaborative, where all this information is housed. Some of the information is at the member portal, and some of it is available to the public through the Regional Resilience and Recovery webpage. And I ask that if you haven't visited it yet, it's under the Regional Collaboration tab on our webpage, and it's got these resources on it and an overview of the project and additional materials. Next slide. So the program launch really for this collaborative builds upon the project that was launched in April with the concept developed and supported by EDA for the disaster grant, the hiring of a resilience analyst coordinator position, and then moving forward into a program as requested by not only our EM leads, but recognized by EDA as part of the comprehensive economic development strategy process. So what have we done along the way to help that understanding? We've talked to more than 520 individuals as part of the process. We've had 87 program and development meetings. We conducted the 3 workshops that Lee talked about, and we created 10 work products as a result of it. And as I said, so that information is on our website and in our member portal. Next slide. So where are we headed? We really want to build regional resilience through pre-disaster planning and honor the request that was made from the emergency management leadership that we've built as part of the collaborative, and the trust that gave them those customized documents and that web tool to take it to the next steps. We'd like to use our expertise with local government partnerships to assist our EM leads in partnering and collaborating on recovery planning so that they can maybe own the plan as part of EM, but actually the local government implements and operationalizes the plan in day-to-day functions, which is key. So that's going to require us to enhance these recovery role relationships. And what we've learned is pre-disaster regional recovery planning, when it's embedded in local government daily functions, means money, time, and resources are saved when economic shocks occur. So by being ready and having recovery embedded in the day-to-day functions of local government, money, time, and resources are the result of being saved when economic shocks occur. And that was resonated by not only the work from FEMA and NCORE and our emergency management leads, but recognized in the data that we gathered for the project. Next slide. So we're going to continue to collaborate with the website and member portal and the equity tool. We are going to build upon the work that we did with the small business and micro business support recovery that we did for Union and Mecklenburg County as part of the coronavirus relief package. We're also going to establish the collaborative membership and formalize it so that we can actually have a working group with mission, goals, objectives, and an organizational structure. That's going to require a little bit more work. We have to do some evaluation phone calls with county M's to find out what worked, what didn't work, how can we best help, and then reach out to our county managers and outreach and collaborate with them and meet with them. We need to fund the Regional Resilience Collaborative. I'll talk about that in a minute. And we're also going to support the CEDS, the economic resilience component that is required by EDA. Next slide. So we're going to first build this program membership, and we need your help with that. We need to reach out to individual and counties to have meetings to educate them about recovery efforts, the importance of being ready and embedding it in recovery and local government functions, and establishing regular meetings for the collaborative and outcomes and goals, and then define additional areas of focus which have been lifted up, such as how do you embed disaster recovery in job positions And how do you identify recovery support functions? Next slide. A little bit about the funding. So this slide presents federal and state funding opportunities. These are the existing ones. Lee had mentioned the American Rescue Plan Act, FEMA, EDA, Department of Ag, and HUD. And we also looked at state items. The recent state allocation that was made to the North Carolina Councils of Governments may be leveraged as matching funds to help pursue new funding dollars from federal grants, but also to implement the collaborative through Centralina and continue our assistance in getting it going. We have had our county EMs working on North Carolina EM hazard planning, Office of Recovery and Resilience, NC Commerce, the urban areas, and the 2 nuclear plants. So there's a lot of work going on. It's about putting them together and getting it to be economies of scale and no duplicative efforts. Next slide. So this project aligns with the existing SEDS Framework 1, which is to create and maintain a globally competitive region. This project and the Industry Clusters Project are both objectives and goals under that Goal 1. And then the 5 clusters with the work and research of EI are also being considered in this resilience component. Next slide. So the EDA in the new SEDS, or the update SEDS that's happening right now, is being launched for 2023 and 2027, includes an economic resilience component. And it really is 2 things. One, it looks at planning for implementation for resilience, making sure resilience is a steady state function, and establishing information and networks to make sure that it's responsive. And these are the 4 components of the SEDS economic resilience. Next slide. This slide presents how those 4 components for the SEDS meet the RRC components. So we have economic resilience, we have the portal where we have information, the website, and we also have the recovery guide, the recovery plan template, and the web application. So the documents that we've been working on are actually gearing up to align for this SEDS update. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes our presentation, and we're available for questions and comments from the board. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Christina and Lee. They're both online. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Christina or Lee on that presentation? That's a lot of information. Wow. I encourage everyone to go to the webpage on the Regional Resilience Collaborative homepage for further information. And I know those on the executive board with us that are with county commissioners that are with us. I know you're familiar with your emergency management directors regarding this project. And then I look too, if Leslie Mazingo is still on the line, when you mentioned state and federal funding, where Leslie could possibly help on the federal funding end of it with that information. So that's a lot of good stuff.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions for Christina or Lee? Great project through the EDC, and I appreciate you folks being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For everyone that we will receive that as information. And now we'll move on to item 8, the Centralina Strategic Plan Update. The Executive Board will receive an update on the Regional Dialogue Series engagement, discuss findings and receive information on the Centralina Strategic Planning process. I'll now look to our Executive Director, Geraldine Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I hope everyone had a great holiday and a good start to 2022. I know our staff is halfway through this fiscal year. We're preparing for our move, which will happen in a few short weeks, and thinking ahead to Centralina's next strategic plan, which will guide our activities starting in fiscal year 23. So Emily, Parker, and I are going to present to you this evening the results of our regional dialogue series set of activities, which we introduced to all of you back in September. Can you go to the next slide, Kelly? So just as a reminder, the purpose of the Regional Dialogue Series was to reconnect with our stakeholders across the region, having been working from home, working remotely, not having in-person meetings, not having those touch points with our different stakeholder groups. We wanted to create a formal initiative to reconnect and to start to unpack what the last 24 months of the pandemic and the challenges facing our region now and in the future might look like, and what it means for this organization. And the insights that we're using from the regional dialogue series are informing two processes that are happening and will launch very soon in the next couple of weeks. Christina just mentioned one, the comprehensive economic development strategy, and then also Centralina strategic plan. Next slide, Kelly. So just a quick note of context before we jump into the details of what we heard. Our organization's strategic plan very much shapes how we respond to the needs of our members and the opportunities to move our region forward in a strategic way. It directs our internal work plan and our budget, our advocacy with state and federal partners, as well as how we engage our members. But the goals that we work towards are very much shared at the regional level with the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or CEDS. And this is the regional blueprint for how we build towards prosperity and economic opportunity, how we respond and recover from COVID and build resilience, as Christina just mentioned. And it's basically an action agenda for not only Centralina, but for economic development partners across the spectrum of the public, private, and nonprofit sectors in the region. So two very different documents with different audiences and different purposes, but our goal is to have synergy between the goals that we're working towards as a region. So with that little bit of context, I'm going to turn over the rest of the presentation to my great colleague, Emily Parker. Before I do, I just want to give her a well-deserved shout out for all of her fantastic work in leading this effort. As you'll see in just a moment, was an incredible effort to engage many different audiences and voices. And it was not only a lot of organization, but it was a lot of strategic thinking in its own. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily to share with you the results.
Well, thank you, Geraldine, and good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's so good to be with you, even on Zoom. So let's, without further ado, jump right in. Kelly, can you go to the next slide, please? So y'all may have seen this slide before. Maybe it's been a while, though, but this is a snapshot of the process that we endeavored to undertake for the Regional Dialogue Series. You can see on the left-hand side, we had a survey, and I'll talk more about the survey piece in a second. In October, November, December, we had a series of focus groups that we put on. We also joined several existing meetings, and I can walk through those in a minute just to hear from as many of our stakeholders and partners as possible. Then we had a subcommittee that I'll talk about a little bit more in just a second. They convened in December. We shared preliminary themes and findings with them. And then here we are tonight, speaking with y'all and sharing what we heard from the survey and the focus groups. And as Geraldine just mentioned, the work will continue after this month and throughout, the many coming months, as far as really developing the next Centralina strategic plan and also the next CEDS. So Kelly, next slide, please. This subcommittee, we cannot thank them enough for their participation, but really backing up a second, the purpose of this group was really, as you can see on your slide there, was to champion this process, was to encourage their colleagues and staff people they work with to complete the survey and participate in focus groups. And as you can see, participate in focus groups or host them, and also help us make meaning of what we heard. So next slide, Kelly. And here are our wonderful subcommittee members. We are so thankful for your time. We know how very, very busy you are. You're pulled in 1,000 different directions. We just appreciate your time and your insights and your dedication to Centralina and to this process. And we just really respect and appreciate all of your different perspectives, as many of you came from different parts of the region. So we just can't thank you enough for your time. Next slide, Kelly. So the survey. there was a two-pronged engagement. We had a survey and we had the focus groups piece. So focusing a little bit on the survey, we launched at the end of September, closed November 30th. We received about 108 responses. At the very end, we asked people if they would like, to hear more information or to be involved in a focus group. About 35 people signed up for that across all different sectors. So that was great. Most of our folks who applied were not elected or appointed, but work in local government, which is not terribly surprising as our organization primarily serves local government. But we did receive responses from all 9 of our counties. So that's good news. Kelly, next slide. So the survey was organized roughly like this. We had a couple of questions that focused on looking back. So in the last 5 years, how have a set number of issues changed in your community? Same question, but how have issues changed in the region? In the survey, if you recall, if you took it, we gave folks a list of probably 12 or 13 different issue areas to rank on a Likert scale if things have gotten better, about stayed the same, or gotten worse per issue area. So that's the looking back questions. The looking ahead questions really focused on what issues will have the greatest impact on our region's growth, quality of life, and economic prosperity looking ahead into the future. And then importantly to us, what issues would benefit from regional collaboration across jurisdictions, across sectors. So really what we heard in the looking back section, what's on the left side of your screen there, the issues that came up as kind of the top issues that have gotten worse over the past 5 years were really the same for both looking through the community lens and through the regional lens. And they are overall cost of living, quality and affordability of housing, which is probably not terribly surprising, and then commuting times to school and work. What we didn't hear a lot about was health issues, kind of access to fresh food, feelings of overall safety, and so on. But those issues about housing, cost of living, and commuting times or transportation related issues really rose to the top when people look back in the past 5 years and kind of what really Neil hasn't moved much in people's estimations. In the looking ahead section, the area of greatest impact that we asked about, again, the issues that really rose to the top in the survey were about, rising cost of living, infrastructure to support growth, ability to balance growth with quality of life, housing insecurity and homelessness, and also the real or perceived divisions, be it social, racial, economic, political, and also urban, rural. And then last snapshot of what we heard about what areas could benefit from regional collaboration. Similar issues about kind of infrastructure to support growth, issues around cost of living, ability to balance growth, the housing insecurity and homelessness piece, and also environment, open space, and natural resources stewardship. So that's a quick rundown of the issues that kind of simmered up or bubbled up to the top. Kelly, next slide, please. So also in the survey, we had a couple of questions that were open-ended, so people could fill in the blank. In the next 5 years, the region will be blank, and we got a whole wide, interesting variety of answers to that question. And then we asked people, what are the top issues, that will influence the region kind of in a positive way, and also issues of concern. But this is the kind of what our opportunity areas are. And of course, you've seen a word cloud before. Hopefully, the words that are biggest were mentioned the most in survey responses. So of course, housing, workforce issues, transportation, infrastructure. Nothing terribly shocking here, but just confirmation that we were just hearing this kind of repeated themes. Next slide, Kelly. The next prong of our engagement was about the focus groups that I mentioned. Now, the purpose of the focus groups was to not duplicate survey, what people did in the survey or filled out in the survey, but really to build on survey results and to get people's different impressions of the themes or issue areas that were really bubbling to the top. And we asked people in the focus groups, we had the same process and same questions by and large for each of the focus groups, but we asked people to prioritize issues that the region that we still need to work on over the next few years, and also areas of potential collaboration. So Kelly, next slide. So here's a little bit of the by the numbers. We ended up having 11 focus groups with almost 60 participants, and we of course reached local government staff and elected officials. We certainly spoke with our regional managers group that we convene on a monthly basis. We had particular focus groups for Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Commission staff from around the region. We had a group that focused on our college and university staff also from across the region, and from our faith community and nonprofit groups. So in terms of existing meetings, we had time on agendas for 6 different meetings. So, the Centralina, the larger board of delegates, our workforce development board, our Centralina Economic Development Board, what Chris and Lee were talking about, the Regional Resiliency Collaborative Workshop. They graciously gave us a few minutes on one of their very busy agendas, so we appreciate that. And a big thanks to Councilmember Amelia Stinson-Wesley for introducing me to MECMIN, which is a faith-based organization that convenes a lot of nonprofits, helping nonprofits around the Charlotte-Mecklenburg region. So Amelia, thank you for that. And also we were able to join with our aging department in December and speak with a lot of their service providers and volunteers for their really invaluable insights. So thank you, Linda. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So you can see this is just a snapshot of the different organizations that were represented in our focus groups and kind of who we heard from. So it's thinking of our really big region and all of our different communities and everything, this is a pretty good, I feel like a pretty good representation of communities. We had someone from Georgia Lozier from Representative Hudson's office. We had someone from International House, from Refugee Support Services, and just a variety. So it was a real pleasure to get to meet a lot of these folks and to make new connections and see old friends. It was a good thing. So next slide, please, Kelly. So the long and short of it is, in terms of the survey and the focus groups, these are really the big issues that bubbled up from both of those kind of bodies of work. So definitely about housing, about balancing growth with quality of life, infrastructure, transportation and mobility, and that can mean a variety of things as you see there in parentheses. Certainly environment and open space, natural resources stewardship, and then also about bridging the divides that we live with. All right, top issues. So next slide, Kelly. Good news is that the top issues that were on the last slide are on your left here in this table. If you look on the right, that is kind of a line or an assessment basically based on Centralina's current goals, the things we are already involved in, already focused on. You can see with current, with infrastructure, ability to balance growth with quality of life, transportation, these are areas that we're already working in, involved in, and so on. New, as you can see on the top, with housing. That's not necessarily an area that we're actively engaged in at this point, but potentially will be in the future, we'll see. And then as far as environment, open space goes, it's a legacy effort in that in the past, we've certainly been involved in different environmental initiatives, but maybe not so much in the past 3 or so years, but it's not necessarily new territory to us. And then another new effort or a new area of focus, potential focus, could be on the bridging the divides that we live with. So that's a snapshot. We're not too far afield from work in areas that we're already involved in, but there's certainly potential and room for growth in different areas. So Kelly, with that, I think I'll turn it over to Geraldine.
Thanks, Emily.
You're welcome.
So some of the key takeaways that we have in thinking about what does this mean for our future activities at Centralina and as being codified in a new strategic plan. As Emily just recapped, the survey basically affirmed that we are still working on a number of really critical issues that are still important to the region. What we do, our activities, our modalities, our approaches to these issues may need to change. We could continue to do things that were planned, such as the implementation of Connect Beyond, which will really address some of the transportation issues that were identified as critical. But maybe on the issue of growth, we need to think a little bit differently about how we're supporting our local governments prepare for the growth that's coming or that is already in their communities. So those are some of the things that our team will be considering as we sift through this information and think about what it means for the organization. Although, as Emily mentioned, we offered in the survey a predetermined set of issue areas for folks to react to, the focus groups through the interactive discussion also pointed to a number of issues that maybe didn't rise to the surface in the survey or weren't in the survey at all. And I just wanted to highlight those here because they are very important to our team and things that we have seen and our expertise that we think is important to focus on in the coming years. And that's certainly how does our region recover from COVID and the pandemic, and how are we supporting local governments in the deployment of recovery funding across the region. Another thing that's been highlighted very importantly in the last 12 to 18 months has been the impact that the pandemic has had on our local government workforce, and particularly on capacity and retirements. And what could we do as an organization within our mission of supporting local governments on that particular issue. And we know that health has always been something that Centralina has been focused on, particularly in how we support individual health and aging through our work at the AAA, but expanding that potentially and looking at how we plan for healthy communities and renewing that work that Centralina has been active in the past. And then, of course, what this all means for our economic recovery and resilience. So a number of issues, a lot of great data and information that our very capable team is going to spend some time thinking through, and then we'll come back to the board with some ideas this spring. Just wanted to talk about those next steps in the next slide, Kelly. So as I mentioned, we're going to do some of our own work and thinking through this. We'll come back to the board, executive board, and full board of delegates probably later in the spring, April or May, with a set of regional goals for your consideration. Then we'll turn to developing the strategic plan and similarly a work plan to guide next fiscal year's activities as we've done each year for the past 3 years. And then we'll likely bring back an official document to the board for endorsement this summer or early fall. So that's kind of a high level recap of our next steps. And so I'll just put this back up just as a final input summary. These 10 points is really what we heard both from the survey and also from the focus groups. And with that, would just ask if there are any questions or initial feedback that the board wants to have or wants to give us as we start to think about this information. And we likely would love to hear any feedback or questions that you might have at this time. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Geraldine, our executive director, and of course, Emily Parker, who always does a great presentation. Thank you both. If you look on your agenda and your notes, it's receives information and provide feedback. So does anybody on the executive board have any questions or comments concerning this Centralina strategic plan? I'll say that what I participated in was like kind of a brainstorming, sharing ideas part. And of course, on the background of it, it talks about issues of regional importance. And Emily showed that word cloud and the words that stuck out. So even in our 9 counties, we're all facing the same thing. And I think we have for quite some time. So here at Centralina, we're addressing this. How can we help? My area, your area, and in all the areas in the 9 counties that are facing the same thing. So I think it's very important as we move forward in 2022 with this project. Any comments? If not, thank you, ladies. Great information. And of course, the board of delegates and our executive board will hear more of this and throughout the year as we proceed with this. again, is to receive information. So folks, keep us under your hat, because we'll be still working on it as the year goes on. We'll move now to item 9, the board orientation planning update. The staff will present plans for this year's delegate orientation. And I want to say this: we have a board of delegates meeting next month. We break out in our little counties areas and all that to see who's going to do what. And we're liable to see a lot of new faces. So orientation is very important. It is to me. I've been on this as part of this as a delegate on the board for, this is my 11th year this year. So, and I still look forward to orientation, because I hear from the folks at Centralina, and I always receive information that I put in my book that I keep with me to refer back to. So I think orientation is very important, and Kelly Weston is going to bring us up to speed on what happens there. So Kelly Weston, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the purpose of this item is really just to share with you all our plans for this year's delegate orientation. And so, as Mr. Chairman just mentioned, each year we present a session at the annual meeting that serves as both an orientation for new delegates as well as a refresher session for returning delegates. And we typically use that time to present a general overview of Centralina, our services, and also to provide an explanation of the board's role, as well as the responsibilities and the expectations of individual delegates. And so we've come up with an idea for a new orientation format that we'd like to implement this year. And it's really a 2-part approach designed to increase engagement among the delegates, especially the new delegates. And the first part consists of individual orientation meetings. And so we will be scheduling these virtually. They'll be led by the clerk, myself, and the member liaison assigned to each community. And so our initial priority will be outreach and meeting with new delegates, but we'll also offer these sessions to returning delegates. We'd like to use these to kind of have like a one-on-one, or really more of a 2-on-1, I guess, to give new delegates an opportunity to ask questions, and really just to establish a personal connection with them that we think will be able to encourage them to attend meetings once they have that, are able to put a face with Centralina. The second part of the orientation plan will serve as a follow-up to those individual meetings, and that will be at the annual meeting on February 9th. And so we'll be conducting an interactive poll for all delegates, both new and returning, to participate in. And the questions in that poll will cover information about Centralina and the board. And our intent is that this activity will reinforce the information that we'll be covering during those individual sessions with the new delegates. It'll also be information that you all will have heard at previous orientation sessions. And so we're thinking that it'll help us gauge the full board's knowledge and awareness of Centralina, and also the role of the board in the organization, and then also help us to identify some areas where we may need to do a deeper dive on some of the information and follow up on that later on. So that's kind of our approach for this year with in terms of orientation, and we just wanted to present that to you all as our plan, and to receive any feedback you might have on this approach. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any feedback.
Thank you, Kelly Weston. As you look on your agenda, it says provide feedback. Anybody have any feedback for Kelly Weston regarding the orientation? Again, it's very important that we get this, that we receive this, and know what our roles are as for the coming year. The time sensitivity on that is of course the annual meeting to be held on February the 9th. So please mark that down and make sure you have that as we get into this. So I think it's a good way to handle it. And I think in the past, Centralina has been good to mix up the orientation a little bit by doing things differently. Used to hand out a 3-ring binder to everyone, and just here, take this and read it, and had all the information you need. And then they maybe would delve deeper into that 3-ring binder the next time, and the next time be something else. So they were changing it up a little bit. I think this is a good way to do it. We'll try this year. I'm sure it's going to be very informative to everyone. Any comments before we go to the next agenda item? Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate everything. Thank you so much. Kelly Weston, our clerk. The next item is item 10, the nominating committee report. I'd like to recognize our representative from the city of Charlotte, Councilman Larkin Eccleston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be brief. We were the nominating committee. It was myself, Cabarrus County Commissioner Lynn Shue, and Morven Council Member Corinthia Lewis Lemon. We met in December, or we had a phone call in December, and were responsible for identifying the slate of officers for Centralina for the year 2022. The incumbent officers that we have currently had all expressed an interest in continuing to serve, and I think have all done a wonderful job. We did want to make sure that other members of the organization knew that if they were interested in putting themselves or someone else forward for one of those positions, that they had the opportunity to do so. So on behalf of our committee, in mid-December, an email went out to all delegates alerting them of the office positions, as well as the work that each entails, and calling for nominations by January 3rd. We did not receive any additional nominations aside from the incumbents self-nominating to continue their service in those spots. With that said, the nominating committee would like to proceed with the following slate of nominees: Chair, Commissioner Bobby Compton; Vice Chair, Mayor Pro Tem Jay McCosh; Secretary, Commissioner Jarvis Woodburn; and Treasurer, Mayor Pro Tem William Morgan. We will present this to the Board of Delegates for a vote at the virtual annual meeting on February 9th, and the officers will be installed at that same time, assuming approval. And that is the nominating committee's report.
Thank you, Councilman Eggleston. Any questions for Councilman Eggleston on his report? And thank you to the nominating committee, along with Councilman Eggleston, to do that. They followed Article 9, Section B of the Centralina bylaws. They followed that regarding the slate of nominees, and then put it out to each of the delegates. They email into the delegates as Councilman Eggleston stated, and they heard no further responses other than what he reported. So to the nominating committee, thank you. We'll receive as information and look forward to February the 9th. We'll now go to getting to the last of our agenda, the comments from the executive board and Centralina staff. Anyone on the board, anyone that has joined in with us tonight, whether Centralina staff or members of our board, you have the floor. You're welcome to say anything, have any questions or comments. Hearing none, we'll move to our executive director, Geraldine Gardner.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I do have a few brief comments for the board this evening. First, as Leslie has mentioned in her item, the final rule is out for the American Rescue Plan funds. In addition, I believe the board is aware that in the state budget, all of the councils of government statewide have received an appropriation through the North Carolina Association of Regional Councils of Governments and CARCOG. We are working on a plan to respond to how we are going to be using those funds, and we'll be presenting that plan to our regional managers group next Wednesday. So I encourage you all to encourage your managers to attend that session at 11:30 so that we can make sure that our approach is going to be responding to local needs for support in ARPA spending across the region for small communities as well as larger communities and both counties and municipalities. As part of that effort, we're also collaborating with the League and the Association of County Commissioners to make sure that we're all working together to provide a comprehensive solution to support our local government. So just wanted to put that on your radar, and we'll certainly give an update to the board on the final scope of those activities very shortly. The second item is our NC radar project update. The budget also did instruct the NC Department of Emergency Management to work with the 3 councils of governments in the Piedmont radar gap area on a study to assess the needs for additional radar stations. So we're in conversations with NC EM's office to get that work started. And I know it's been a long time coming. The radars aren't built yet, but we are making progress. And I just wanted to provide that update to the board as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to put on your radars a tangential issue for Centralina. It's really something that our Workforce Development Board is confronting, but it is a statewide issue, and I do want the board to be aware of this. Governor Cooper and the NC Works Commission, which is the state workforce development board, has a governance and system alignment committee. They made the decision just before the holidays to begin a workforce development board realignment and redesignation study statewide. The proposal that's being considered and studied by both the commission and NC Commerce would consolidate the 23 local workforce development boards into the 8 NC Commerce prosperity zones. So this is something that would directly impact the 3 workforce boards in our region: Centralina, which serves 7 out of our 9 counties, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg, Charlotte Works Board, as well as Gaston County's board. Our COG area aligns with the Southwest Prosperity Zones plus Cleveland County. So our impacts are a little different than other COGs across the state, which have very little boundary alignment with the prosperity zones and would be disruptive in different ways. David has briefed the board. They've had a conversation about it, and Commissioner Woodburn is the chief elected officer for the Centralina Workforce Board and has been engaged in this as well. But there's just a number of concerns beyond the boundary issue. There's also concern about the large regions having a loss of control, local control specifically due to the consolidation, and specifically the loss of connectivity between some of our more rural areas and smaller communities that may have different workforce needs than some of our larger metro areas. So we are watching this issue. We are working closely with the NC Association of Workforce Development Boards, as well as the Regional Council Association. This is going to be a political issue. And the commission is set to have the findings of the study completed by early February. So it's also moving very quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions or have David follow up with folks, and would also ask Commissioner Woodburn if he wanted to add anything from his perspective as the chief elected officer on Centralina's side. So those are all of my updates. And thank you for the additional time this evening to provide those to you.
Thank you, Geraldine. Commissioner Woodburn.
About the only thing I would add is that in my conversations with David and the presentation that he put together in response to this move, it was very good. And we're just going to try to push forward with it and try to keep things as they are. But this is a statewide effort, so I'm hoping we'll be successful.
Thank you, sir. Our executive director mentioned it's a political issue. I know we hear that a lot, and yes, we're elected officials, and some may deem us as politicians or in the political field. But this is something that I wish it wasn't that way, but we'll see how it turns out. But I think it may be one of those that somebody's testing the waters to see how it's going to go, but hopefully they just leave things as they are. Thank you, Geraldine, our executive director. And my closing comments, just a couple of things. One, I also want to mention the radar project. I'm very excited about that. Every time Geraldine mentions it, how this is moving forward in some way, shape, or form. I think that's progress that's never been made before. So I'm happy to hear that. And then lastly, just again, a reminder, I've already said it once, but a reminder of our February 9th Board of Delegates meeting. It'll be held Wednesday, February 9th at 5 o'clock via Zoom. So again, we'll do the virtual thing, and hopefully the COVID numbers will come down. So I think by spring, we're trying to get back in seeing each other face to face as the year continues. So we hope that's the case. But February the 9th, 5 o'clock via Zoom. Hope to see or hear you on that date. And with that, meeting adjourned. Thank you.